Ravendale?
Yes, we are. And the bottom picture in Ravendale was when Uncle Rodney, who was my mother's oldest brother, and his family came to visit us in Ravendale. And they're in this picture also. They used to come in the summertime. They lived in McLeod, California. Then over on the next picture is back up at the homestead, and Grandpa Douglas is there with us children and goats. We had to get goats because Bert was starting to get the rickets. So the doctor said, get some milk for those children. And so we did. And so the goats were tied to a tie rod out of a, I don't know, Model T or whatever. Anyway, Joy found that when we went back years later.
So the picture that you were talking about with your cousins on the bottom, there was the Hawkins cousins and there were Douglas cousins.
No, well, these were all our family, our children, my siblings, and my mother's brother's siblings.
But isn't one of them a Hawkins? Marjorie, isn't she a Hawkins? From the Hawkins
Marjorie,
side of your
yes,
family?
she was my dad's youngest brother's daughter, Marjorie. They lived, well, they had a homestead next to us, and they came up from Orland to Ravendale together.
So did the Douglas, your Douglas cousins and your Hawkins cousins, did they know each other well, or is this just a circumstance?
I don't know. I was pretty little myself, but as we all got older, they were, Merle and Harold were Uncle Rodney's children, and they were Joy and Fred's age, but not mine. They were much older than me.
And so why are you abusing the horse on the top page?
Abusing him?
We've got 3 people on the horse.
Oh, they weren't abusing. That's the way Fred, Joy, and Bert went to school. That was on Kitty. That was the old gray mare that Tommy caught out of the van to ride when he got killed.
And that's how they got to school every day, or that's?
Well, yes, either that, or sometimes they have to go with a buggy, or depends on the weather.
Okay.
Then we're in Ravendale still. Joy was there with Althea. It was after the fire. Joy, Althea, and Tommy with. Carol has Laddie. Althea has Laddie, which was our favorite dog. He was so sweet. And then the one that Tommy has was Althea's little dog. She used to go out on the ditch bank and sleep when they moved to Ontario. And she'd take her blanket, and that was, of course, after the fire when my mother was gone. So Althea slept on the ditch bank with her dog, Pal. Then this is the 2 homestead cabins put together, Uncle Jim's and ours, so that we'd have a house to live in there in Ravendale after the fire. And these were some of the horses and foals. Althea's riding one of the new foals, has that on her. My dad used to, whenever there was a new foal, he would always take it around so he'd get used to the noise and the people. And later on, as I grew older and realized what he's doing, he would take a new foal around to the noises, and he would take them in the house and back out again so that he'd see a lot of different things.
Inside the house?
Yeah, inside the house. He didn't tarry there. He just walked it in so he'd see a lot of different things, get used to it. Then on the next page, on 111, is my mother and Fred and Joy. They were only a year apart in age. And then as Fred got older, he was there with his sister, Joy, and their cousin Merle, who was Uncle Rodney's daughter.
And the house in the background, is that?
No, I don't recognize the house in the background. That was before my time. My first recollection of a house was at the homestead. Then on this page, it's pretty self-explanatory. Only Althea and I were living, after the fire, we lived in Berkeley with my dad's grandparents, Grandpa and Grandma Hawkins. And then there's Aunt Eva, my dad's youngest, only sister, and Grandpa and Grandma. These were all taken in Berkeley here on this one row. And then Dad was, I don't know where he was. It looks kind of like it was Burke's Ranch up at Brogan. And then the picture down below is Uncle Elmer, who was just older than my dad in line. There was Uncle Charlie, then Uncle Perry, then Uncle Elmer. And this was Uncle Elmer's first wife with these three children from Aunt Vera, who was his first wife. And there was Violet and Vern and Bob. Bob was close to my age, but Violet was Joy and Fred's age.
Did you hang with them a lot while you were in Berkeley?
Well, just Bob.
Just Bob.
The others were older than I.
Do you have any memories of playing with Bob or hanging
Yes,
with
well, not too often, but he'd come down and we would play, but we didn't get to see him too often. And then Vern eventually went in the Navy when he was older.
And Violet,
Violet was married when at the time I was living down with Grandpa and Grandma in Berkeley.
And but did you, because the oldest cousin is always revered by the younger cousins.
Well,
did you idolize her?
I saw Violet when Elaine and Gordon had the Hawkins reunion down in Bakersfield. It was the reunion. I can't remember the name of, but I saw Violet. She was there, and we were so glad to see each other because we hadn't seen her all the years in between after Berkeley. I hadn't seen her.
Oh, really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of pintos in these pictures?
Well, Dad liked pintos.
They weren't the same horse.
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I know this was Dad's favorite, and when that horse passed away, Dad had some kind of it was not a rug, I don't think, because I had seen it on Dad's bed that he made some kind of a blanket or a throws from that horse because he loved that horse so much. So he made just a keepsake for the horse because he loved him so.
And so, if he loved the pinto, so he had a lot of pintos when you were growing up?
If you see in the early pictures, there was some pintos in there. I don't know if that was the run of the day that everybody liked a pinto. But you had to be careful of pintos because some of them had glass eye and they were a little bit, you had to treat them with care.
So when did he start raising Arabians?
Oh, when I was in college. He got his first Ibn Manad, he got a stallion. And then later, I think when Dad and Alta went to get their car at Detroit, I think he was looking up some Arabian farms at that time that he went back. And so then later he began to breed up and get purebred mares to go with Ibn Manad, who was a purebred stallion.
So after that point, was there a certain point where all he had was Arabians? Or did he still have more horses?
No, I think the other horses, I don't know. I know at one time when I was home, he had a burro, and he would honk every once in a while. Whenever I took him out to water, he got to do his little song out there. But he did, for many years, had mules. He loved mules when he was still able to work, with horses and mules. And when they first went to Ontario after the fire, they got there and they couldn't work, couldn't get a job until they had lived there for 3 months. So in the meantime, in order to feed the horses, and I don't know if we had cows at that time, he and Fred used to get horses that hadn't been broke and tie them to snubbing to a trained mare, and then it would hold the other horse down that he couldn't do all he wanted. And so they broke horses for other people, and that was the only way they could get feed for the horses or maybe food for the family.
And for 3 months, because he wasn't an Oregon resident?
Yes, they could not work because he had to be a resident for 3 months.
Wow. And so were the kids there during that time, or he was just setting the farm up at that time?
Well, that was during the time that he was building the farm.
And you weren't there yet? You were in Berkeley?
Well, no, right at that time. Then after he'd been there 3 months, then they could work, out and get paid.
But I guess my question is, at what point did the rest of the kids join him in Ontario, or the younger kids, you and Althea?
Well, Alfie and I came back when I was about 11. I'd been there to Grandpa and Grandma's between the age of 8 and 9 and went to the hospital, and then when I was 11, we came home.
And to Ontario?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's the first time I had been to Ontario after Dad had the house going and all, and so.
So,
All right, this was down in Berkeley where my grandparents lived. Grandpa and Grandma Hawkins lived, and Alfie and I stayed with them. And these are trips when, this first one at the top, when Daddy came down to see us, and he had every time I needed to go for surgery or anything, he would come down and try to be there as much as he could. And I had a little red dress on there. Before the fire, I had a little red dress, and we didn't have too many new things, I don't think, unless my grandmother made some for us. But I had a red dress, and I was 8 years old at that time. And I loved that red dress, the prettiest dress I had ever owned. And so after the fire, I was still bemoaning that I'd lost my red dress. And so Daddy bought me another one, and that's the one I have on in this picture right here.
did you wear it often, or only for
Well,
special
only
occasions?
for good. I didn't wear it for every day, of course. And this is Alfie and I in front of the sheds where Grandpa Hawkins had the workings of it. He raised bees there at the place where they lived in Berkeley. And so he would make frames for the bees, and then he'd put a strip of beeswax on the bottom for a start for the bees to start making their honey and build up.
Huh.
And then when the frames were filled with honey, he would take them to Lodi to Uncle Charlie's, and they had a big, looked to me like a big round barrel, but they had gouges in there that they could put the honey frame that the bees make in there, and then it would start whirling, and it would whirl the honey out of the combs.
And that's how they processed it. And then was it
It
good
was
for
honey
eating?
then. It was, yeah,
They
I
sold it like
guess.
that.
I was pretty little. I
Well,
don't remember what they did with it after that.
in the marchés you see raw honey, so that must have
That,
been
well,
the way they
that's
processed
what they did
it.
at that time. What they do now is much more
Maybe they-
sophisticated, I'm sure.
I bet they still do, because these are from farms. The raw honey that I see
Well,
are from
but
farms.
I'm sure the farmers have up-to-date methods too now. The one, they were dying off, and they were having trouble with bees. So now I think it's building back up again. I think they're getting them.
And wait, I'm gonna ask you about the doll and your very fashionable 1920s haircut.
Oh, that haircut. You noticed in the last picture with the doll, Althea has nice curls on there. Well, my curls, if I ever had any, were cut off at school one time when I went to school there in Berkeley. And there was a little girl that I think she was Latino or something like that. And she I was wearing a tam to keep my head warm or what for the rain, whatever. Anyway, she grabbed that just playfully and ran, so I'd run and catch her. And then when I got it back, a day or so later, whatever, I had head lice. And so my grandmother sat me on the floor with a towel on her lap, and she had a two-sided comb, very fine teeth, that she would comb through my hair and get the eggs and wipe the comb, the eggs and whatever on that towel. And so I had to have short hair, so it was easier to get.
But it was, that is happened in 1920s flapper girl hairstyle. I mean, that's pretty
Well, it wasn't. Well, you know, Althea, my dad had to cut it short after the fire. He didn't know how to curl hair or do anything with it, so he kind of gave her kind of a long bob, like the boys, but kept it enough that you could tell she was a little girl. But that doll in that picture with her, Althea with her pretty curls, I don't know if it's the doll But the hospital gave me one year, I don't know if it was Christmas or when, but they gave me a doll. That was one of the first dolls that, they had tiny tears and things that would wet their bottoms, later. But this one, you could just press on her tummy and put your hand close to her mouth, and you could feel the air. She was breathing. It's supposed to be what it was at that time.
And
But I gave that doll, I kept it all those years, and I finally, because Megan, my granddaughter, Megan Trichek, was a little girl, and she loved dolls. Her other grandmother had given her some of the American Girl dolls, but I had this doll, and I wanted to go to someone who loved dolls, to play with dolls. Well, I gave it to Megan Trichek, my granddaughter. And I don't know, they had a house fire, and I don't know if it made it or not.
Let me ask you, if when in the winter, could you see her breath, the doll's breath?
No, you couldn't
Okay.
see it, you could just feel it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. That was just the start of those kind of dolls.
Did you
But
do any research on that doll?
I did research, and she was pretty famous. She had a history, and because she was the first of that kind, she was a baby doll, had soft arms and legs, but she had hands that were made, that were fashioned on, it was soft.
But
I don't know,
plastic.
stuff. Well, yes, some kind of
Firmer.
Some kind of firm for her.
And
but
her
her
face
feet and everything, and her head was
Firm.
Firm, yes. I don't know what they made them out of those days. Yes. And now we're up in the top corner is my mother's family, and there's Aunt Anna, who was Uncle Rodney's wife. Uncle Rodney was my mother's oldest brother, and his wife, Aunt Anna. Then on the other end, I'll start back here, it was Uncle Bill, my mother's youngest brother. And then next to him was my mother, and then there was my grandfather and grandmother, who were my mother's parents. And then there was Grandma Douglas's mother. I have her lineage, but she was Havens. Grandma's maiden name was Haven. Lizzie, it was Elizabeth. They called her Lizzie Havens. And then there was, is there Fred and Joy down there? I think below.
And so that is your mother's, all of her brothers.
She had two brothers.
And her mother.
And her
grandmother. And her grandmother. And your mother's daughter, Joy. So it's 4 generations of Douglas lineage females.
Yes.
That's in one picture.
Yes.
Are there any other pictures that encompass your mom's family like this?
Well, not only this picture
Just
where
this
Althea and I are there. Grandpa and Grandma Douglas used to come to Ravendale, in the summertime when the weather was nice, and they rented or whatever this place out there, and so they stayed in the winter. And sometimes Uncle Bill, who was the last standing next to my mother, his daughter used to come with them, and that's how her name was Fern Douglas, and she and I played together, but she was closer to Tommy's age, and they were very close. But as we got older, Fern and I were quite close.
Yeah, I've seen some other
And then this is my dad's only sister, Eva.
Wasn't there something going on in that, there's a picture of you and Althea.
Oh,
in
back in that barn, I guess it was, in the back that you can see in the background, somebody had stored a beautiful Surrey. And it had the gas lights. I think they had put gas in and could light them, so wherever you went, they were all glassed in.
Wow.
And they had, as I recall, they had fringe on the top of it, but it was gorgeous. It was a beautiful.
Did you ever ride in it or go in it?
Oh no, we played in it very carefully.
Did your parents know that?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose they did, but we knew better than
To ruin it.
to ruin it. I don't think they minded if we go in there. Oh, over here on this horse is Fred on, I can't think of the name of his horse there.
That's okay.
and he was going to take that horse down. And Fred rode them, that was his main horse, and he was on there getting ready to go down and trading for a mule, which was very important in making a living in those days. We had to have horses and mules to work. And then behind Fred is the home that burned, the one we came down to after the homestead. They came down, it was about 3/4 of a mile from town, and Daddy worked in town, of course, which made it closer for him to be. And then that's the house that burned right there.
And what are we seeing? Can you tell us a little bit about like where you slept, where the
Oh,
kitchen
no.
was, where
Well,
the
it was we slept upstairs,
so there's a
and-
second
and,
floor.
and behind the horse, the window that you see there, that was the living room, and then beyond it, on the other side, was my parents' bedroom. And then when you see a window by the horse's neck, that was the dining room. Beyond that was the kitchen, and in the kitchen there was a pantry, and that pantry is the one I ran to when the gasoline exploded in the kitchen, and I ran to the pantry to call my mother, who was the next wall over in the bedroom gathering clothes to wash. And so in the pantry there was a window, and when Mother came from the bedroom to look, the whole kitchen was ablaze, and she was trying to find my little sister, who had ducked under the table, which probably saved her life. Kind of there in the flames and stuff didn't get on her. So she just had one scar above her, on her forehead, but they had taken her out after we were all out. My uncle had put her in the truck to take her to where we were all going, and there must have been some embers or some smoke or something on the back that she was sitting on, and she was crying, and my uncle just thought, well, she was crying because, all the rigmarole that was happening, and but she had scars on the backs of her legs for a while, and just the one above her forehead was all that, well, there's plenty that she got. But I did not break the window in the pantry. We don't do that as children, and I didn't think about doing that. And it was quite a kind of a drop, as you can see from the other windows, how far it was down to the ground. But that would have been better if I'd broken a leg or something, rather than only way I knew out was through the kitchen and through the door there. And when I got out, my mother was on the ground, and my brothers were putting the fire out from her clothes there. And so then they took her, and I think she died in the night sometime, or the next day. They have her as December 4th, but it was December the 5th, actually, that she passed away.
So the fire was on December 4th?
Yes, that was December 4th. And then we all went to McLeod, to a hospital there.
And how far away was McLeod?
I don't remember. We could drive it, but from Ravendale or Susanville to McLeod, if anybody's in, they could figure out how.
But they weren't paved roads.
I don't know. I know we used to go to McLeod for Thanksgiving with my parents, because we couldn't go at Christmas time because the snow going over not Shasta and then McLeod was too deep. So we usually try to connect at Thanksgiving.
And so you think it was 2 hours, 5 hours?
Honey, I was not in any fifth,
No.
and I don't remember before I was too little.
I didn't know if they were paved roads, then it would be a shorter trip. If
don't
they
know
weren't.
that.
Okay.
I don't remember. Then down the bottom is self-explanatory. See the Pinto. There's two of them,
Yeah.
I think. Yes, there. And then the little one was the youngest of the families. Took care of the little one. Then Bert and then Fred had. I don't know who Fred's on, but anyway, those are the cabins that were were the homestead. They put Uncle Jim's and Dad's together, and to put where this house burned.
So they went to the homestead cabins after the fire had leveled the house. Then they went and moved those two homestead buildings to
And
the
put them
place where
together.
the house was. I'm just trying to get a visual of the house, because this was the house you grew up in. I mean, until you
Well,
were 8.
I was 4 years old when we moved there.
Oh, so not long. And did it have a full second floor, or were they dormer windows?
Well, we had dormer windows, and I can't. Well, they're tall enough for me. I was just a little kid.
Yeah.
But we children, my siblings, we all had rooms upstairs. I think Joy and I had a room together. Althea was a baby, so she was with our parents. But Bert and Fred, I don't know.
Must have had a room
Tom,
together.
Bert, Bert got married when he was 16, and then he went down to Turlock, I believe, in California, with his wife's parents, and was working down there at the time of the fire.
And so he never lived in that house, Uncle Fred.
I wouldn't say that. I imagine
You don't
he
know.
did. I don't know.
In
I don't
between.
remember. He got married.
And
early.
so was there a stairway, like a fancy stairway
yes,
to go up?
there was a stairway going down. It wasn't fancy. You didn't have pretty curves. It was just a straight.
But with an arm rail.
I don't know.
Well, I guess I ask because it's Christmas season. I'm trying to think. Did your parents they
Well,
decorate for Christmas?
Well, we couldn't go down until everybody's up and dressed.
Okay.
None of us could go down to Christmas. My mother and Dad, they went in the dining or the living room. There's doors, the sliding doors, I guess, or something.
Pocket doors.
I don't know. I don't think so at that time. I think they were sliding, but they're doors that could be between the living room and the dining room, as I recall. And then they wrapped presents, and the Christmas tree was in the living room. We had.
And that's the second window over.
Yes.
That's on the hind end of the horse.
Yes.
Okay.
And then our Christmas tree, we had candles, and we had to watch it very carefully.
Right.
But there were clips. There were little candles in holders, and they had clips that would clip to the branches, But we were lucky.
Yeah. And then in the dining room, it had a full the regular.
And there was
dining
our
room
table. That's where we all ate. The kitchen was too small for us all to eat there, so we ate in the dining room.
And that's where Althea was. That's where she ran.
No,
Oh.
she was in the kitchen under the kitchen
table. Okay. But the kitchen table was like a preparation table. You ate in the dining room.
I guess.
Okay.
And then the stove at the back door, the table was kind of, must have been some windows there, and then the back door was here, and the stove was over there.
And did you have
It was a Monarch stove, a beautiful stove. My mother was very proud of it because it had on the side of it, it had a water tank, and when we'd heat the stove, burn wood to heat the stove, it heated the water. And then we'd have hot water that we could dip out of that container that was built into the stove. And then she had, up above was where you could kind of warming oven. I mean, you could keep things warm up above the stove. But that Monarch stove was a stove of the day, I guess.
That was her prize.
That was my mother's prize and joy. And one time our parents went to Susanville to get groceries. And so Joy was chief cook there. Bert, the little Dickens that he was sitting up beside Joy while she was making some gravy. And unbeknownst to her, Bert unloosened the top on the pepper shaker so that when she went and put pepper in the gravy, she got a whole bunch of gravy.
And what happened to Uncle Bert?
I don't know.
Sent to the shed.
I imagine he caught it. Well, I don't know what he did. I just remember him putting that in the gravy for Joy. So Bert was, he was doing little tricks like that. He was full of the Dickens.
And when you woke up when all of you went downstairs on Christmas morning, do you remember what you saw?
No, well, the Christmas tree was, right where, where the stove was. We had the table, and then the Christmas tree was in that corner up there. And I said, I said we used to have the Christmas, maybe sometimes we had it in the living room, but this particular, that I remember this Christmas, we had to all get dressed, because the big kids helped the little kids so we could all go down at once. And I remember seeing the tree.
With the candles lit.
Well, I don't remember the candles there, but when it was in the living room, I remember remember the candles there. But the other one, I just remembered all the gifts that were around the tree. And so that was the getting close to the last Christmas we had there.
Is that when you got the doll?
No, the
The
doll was given
after
me
the
when I
hospital,
was
that's
in
right.
when I was in Berkeley.
Yeah,
No.
sorry.
If I had gotten one there, it'd have been gone. All
Yeah,
that I
it would've
had
gone,
would be
yeah.
gone there. All right, the next one is Fred. He has, like in Fred's words, a foot burner Fresno. Well, I don't know about the foot burner, but I always knew that was a Fresno that he had. It had a handle on it, was up when the Fresno was empty, and he'd bring the handle down so it would dig into the dirt and carry a bunch of dirt to wherever they wanted it. Then the bottom picture is the family car in Ravendale, and it used to have a back. It's kind of like a long bed pickup, actually. Mother and Dad sat in the front. There were no glass windows on the side. There was a door, but there were no windows in it. And then the windshield in front, in order to get the snow or rain off of it, you had a little button up at the top that you had to clean your window by just waving it back and forth. Then in the back, it had kind of chain link on the sides of the back. It was all open air, except Daddy would put benches a long way on both sides, and we children would sit on those benches, and Mother would have a blanket, and she would heat bricks and then wrap them in, I don't know, it was tape or what she wrapped them in, and then we'd put our feet on them, keep our feet warm, because it was all open air, and we were right out there. And so then later we had it there in Ontario, and then Fred made a what they call that? Well, it was
Geralt Buck?
no, it was the buck rake,
Okay.
and it had lean tines in it that would go out and scoop up the load of hay. It could get a pretty good grab of hay in one scoop there, and so then we had the Mormon derrick. They'd go, the person at the bottom would have to stick the tines of a great big fork in there and clip it or somehow, and then take it up the derrick cart, would pull the steel cable, pull a cable hitched onto that, and they would pull it up and it would swing over for the stacker.
And when we get to the Ontario pictures, we can see a crane, but this is still in Ravendale.
The derrick.
Oh, the derrick. But
Oh.
these pictures are still in Ravendale.
No.
Oh, this is in Ontario?
This is, well, because it was up in Ontario where Fred made this into buck rake.
Okay, so we've moved to Ontario.
Yes, it was just a picture that kind of resembled some of
Oh,
those.
okay.
That's the reason I put it in there.
But some of these other pictures are Ravendale as we go forward
Well,
a little bit.
yes. Well, at the top picture of cousins, it was Uncle Rodney's children and ours that were together. I'm sure it was where Grandpa and Grandma stayed in the summertime,
Okay.
and they would come out and stay with us. This other is Fred, and they were building roads, I'm sure, there in Ravendale, and that's the only way they had to build roads with horses and mules and the what did I call that word?
Buck rake?
No, this one right here.
Oh. Fresno.
Thank you, Fresno. Yes, a Fresno. So that's what they used then. Later on, well, of course, the picture below has Dad on a cat, and he built a dozer. They could move a lot more dirt faster with this than they could with the Fresno. And so Dad built this in the county shop where he worked. They eventually got a cat in there, and then my dad built the dozer on the front that he could push a lot of dirt much faster. So and then eventually, well, they used to use the horses drawn on the road grader. When they built roads, their horses pulled graders. And then they got motorized, and so, but
I
it
think
was progress.
We'll take a break. How's that?
Okay,
So you can get some water.
all right. To the bottom of the page that we were talking about, I think this is, I don't know if it was the Dodge that we had, this was our family car in Ravendale. It had a bed on the back, but the sides had that chain, like a chain link fence on panels on the side. When we go anywhere, the mother and daddy's side had no door, but they had to get, if it snowed or rained, very little rain, they had to take off a button up at the top and hand clean the windows back and forth. They were the window washer.
Was there a roof?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, see, it's still on there. The roof's still on
I
there.
couldn't see the roof.
And, but it had no, I
Sorry.
guess it had doors at that time, just half doors. It didn't have windows in the side, as I recall. Anyway, so Daddy would put, it was a long bed, and Daddy would put benches in the back of it on both sides, and that's where we kids rode. And Mother, in the wintertime, she would heat bricks and then wrap them in paper, I believe, and then we'd put our feet to keep our feet warm when we were traveling, because it was all open air. So that was our family. But Fred made a buckhoe out of it and used it to haul big, well, they used, what kind of, I don't remember what they call those big bundles of hay, but anyway, he could move quite a bit of hay with that. And of course, with the motor, it was faster than
yeah, than the horses. But was this a permanent construction of the truck after they had used it for family outings and
Oh,
whatnot?
yeah,
Then
well, yeah, well, Fred just cut it down to make
Okay.
the buckle out of it.
I mean, at the very bottom of the next page, he has.
Well, I don't know where, I don't remember him telling me about that Caterpillar or what it was.
It says-
But he made the dozer that was on the front of it. So see, they could move a lot more dirt with more power than they could with the horses.
Yeah, so that replaced the horses.
Well, I don't know, they probably still use
Supplemental, okay.
supplemental, yes.
Okay. Oh, well, good.
All right, this page, it's all about, it's very self-explanatory to read, but this wagon was a wagon that Daddy moved a bunch of our family things up from Orland to Ravendale, and it's in the book Red Rock to Ravendale. It shows our family outfit there. I think that must have been the next load, because Mother didn't come with his first outfit because she was expecting Tommy at the time. So she and Joy and Fred and Bert all stayed behind with her while Daddy got the machine, not machinery, but the equipment and the horses all up to Ravendale. Yes, to Ravendale. And so he used this and also, I think it was a wagon like this that my dad used to drive 20 mule team horses hauling, what was that? Borax across the desert. 20 mules, the whole 20 of them.
And were they 2x2?
Yeah, two. And then they had a jerk line, which is one line that went to the lead horse. And that was, I don't know, during the time with the,
Civil War?
no, I'm talking about the product he chose.
Oh, borax.
Borax, that he hauled borax, but he didn't have 20 reins to hold in his hand. He just had one, and that was the lead mare. And I don't know whether old Joy that Tommy rode when he fell off the horse or not, but they had just one mare that knew all the signals and things that Daddy gave there. So this wagon, he took from Orland to Ravendale, and then he also took it up to Ontario, and it was back in the yard close to the little guest house where we usually stayed when we were there. And Eugene said he used to play in that. And so that has come a long ways. then Mr.
Neil?
Bill
Neil.
Neal bought that wagon in a garage or something close to Vail, Oregon. Evidently after Dad passed, that the estate sold it or somebody came and bought it. But this Bill Neal, he collected, I guess, several different wagons, but this one was his favorite. And he restored that like brand new. He did all the work the way it was done originally. The type of tools that he used, and I mean, it's all in this. You can read it about that. It's very interesting. And then it goes on and explains about different letters, and then and he used to show it in when he showed his wagons, but that was his favorite
Like
one.
rode them in parades and whatnot?
Well, Jean and I don't remember who all went down with us. I would imagine Jan went along too. But he drove it for demonstrations in one of the fairgrounds, and we went down to watch him meander it around. But when he had it all restored, it was a gorgeous wagon.
So is this a before photo? Is that a before photo?
Yes, that's when he found it in the barn or something in Vail. That's the way it looked.
What's the number?
It's picture number 137.
Okay.
And so then the next picture after that original, when he bought it, shows him working on that. As I said, he used the same type of original tools to repair the same tool, the same kind of wood. He went clear back to the original to make that wagon, and then it shows pictures of it as he got it going. And then there's a picture. The last one is a picture of Eugene sitting in the wagon.
And do you know where that picture of Eugene was taken?
Yes, taken down at Bill. What was his
Bill
last-
Neal's?
Bill Neal's farm. We saw it in his barn.
And where was that? Do you remember?
That was
Not important, but
what was Bill Neal's address as a given?
no. But I mean, is it in the Portland area or is it in
Oh
Ontario?
no, it's down towards Salem
Oh, okay,
somewhere
so
around
close
there.
by.
It's down there.
And so the picture of the before photo of Grandpa's wagon, was that what it looked like when we would go visit?
I think that looks pretty much, well, because just after that, I think when Dad passed away, then Dad's estate, evidently somebody came up and saw it, and I don't know if Bill Neal saw it, but he saw it in a barn or somebody had bought it and stored it there, and that's where he got it. Because he was, he loved those kind of things, but it's a beautiful piece of work that he did. And I suppose he's still driving it. But yes, it's gorgeous now, and I'm so pleased. It just
Yeah.
makes me feel. Well, I got to ride in it when we were going. He took us for a ride around the fairgrounds, and I got to ride it, and it just.
Was it the same fairgrounds? Was it the same arena as we used to go and
No,
Dad
no,
would
no.
show horses?
No, I don't know. I think there's a little different places
Okay.
down around Salem area someplace. I can't remember right now, but they can probably find it. Then we go back in time.
And are we in Ontario or are
We're
we
in Ontario
okay.
now. When Dad moved up, lock, stock, and barrel that he could, what was left, then he brought the house up in sections. And so Joy and Althea used to go down to the neighbors, which are about half a mile away. They'd walk down there because he had nice big trees and it was cool. Well, where we were, there were no trees, all sagebrush. And so they'd go down there, spend the heat of the day down there with him. And one day, the neighbor, I can't think of his name now, but anyway, he asked Joy, he said, well, what's your dad doing today? And Joy said, well, he's building a house. Oh, he's building a house today?
In a day.
And so that evening when they were getting ready to come home, he looked up there and there was the house. But Dad was no dummy.
So this is the house, the beginnings of
burned.
the house
No, this is the house
that we would visit
yes,
when we go to Ontario.
that's the beginning of how it looked. They had to put it up quick. And when they first did it, before they put the whatever outside the boards, why the wind would come and it kind of blow through those cracks in the boards, you know, where they came together.
And how long did you live in it like that? Do you know? Well, this is
No, well, see,
1975.
Althea was still about, yes. And then I came up,
Well, I think there's pictures that are. It's kind of a chronology. I think the next page
yes,
has pictures.
the next
of,
page
okay.
shows the house, the barren place. And this was, evidently they were digging the well, this thing was sticking up. I imagine that was the well. When they first moved there, before irrigation, we had nice soft water. And then after the irrigation came in, the water got harder and harder. Because from the irrigation water or something,
Leaked.
I don't know, but
Seeped
it
into the ground.
actually got hard
Huh.
until you put regular soap in there, kind of curdled. And so we used to go down to Trinkle's, who was across the highway from us, and bring up water for we girls to wash our hair in because the other was so hard. We used it was a soap called Drift, I think, and that we could get suds. It reacted, I guess, with the hard water, so that we could get suds to do dishwashes, things like that. But we didn't wash our hair.
And was that the same Trinkle that Uncle Bert married?
Married Helen Trinkle's brother that lived down there,
Okay.
and his wife. All these are this shows the house as it progressed in pictures till that was when the bottom picture was probably the one that you children remember going to when we go to see Grandpa and Grandma.
And that's the whole ranch on that
Yes,
side. Oh, look at that, the trees. There's trees. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
1948.
Oh, my dad planted all those trees and watered them by hand. And on the back side of the place, he had trees along there too. All the trees, before the irrigation project came in, my dad packed water to them, to water them.
and so in 1948, was the irrigation, was it completed, do you think?
I don't remember that, Colleen.
Oh, it must have been because you were in school, you were in college, and
When?
in 1948 you were in college, and you said that once the irrigation came through, that you had to go to the Trinkles to wash your hair.
Well,
so you
yeah,
were still
that was
living at
before,
home.
before I was in college.
Yeah.
And these are pictures of Grandpa's bulls. Now, Grandpa gave us a cow. Choice was the first cow he gave us. She gave a lot of milk, and then she had a calf, but it was a bull calf. So Daddy thought, well, what would we do with one bull? Because we used artificial insemination in those days, didn't have to have a bull. And so this was the carnation bull at the bottom was the carnation bull we bought from the Carnation Farms in Washington, in northern Washington. And he was a beautiful thing. Well, let's see, this is, yes, the middle picture was Choice's bull that we traded to, Dad suggested it, and he was getting the worst part of the deal. But he traded us this bull calf, which we didn't need, for a cow, and it was old Aggie. And Aggie...
Notorious Aggie.
Well, the kids liked to play with her when she was small. Your sister Colleen had it was a corduroy coat that was a blue, kind of a medium blue on the outside of the corduroy. And then it inside had a red lining. Colleen thought this calf, you know, they played with it, and she'd play Toreador, and she'd wave that lining in that coat. She'd take the coat off and wave that red line, the calf, to make it, you know, play. And he was the bull.
She was a matador.
Well, it wasn't a bull, it was Aggie the cow. But as she got older, excuse me, I'm talking too much. As Aggie got older,
And bigger.
she still liked to play, you know, and she wasn't mean, but the kids just played with her. And one time she got Colleen in a corner of a fence where two came together. And she had her, and she was just playing with her. And so that made us kind of leery. Well, one time Dad and Eugene were gone, and there's one cow that evidently she had mastitis or something. Anyway, she was down on the ground, and Dad asked if I would feed her a bunch of hay put out. Of course, she was lying down. And so I did. When they were gone, I went out and took a bundle of hay. It was in chunks. And put it down for her. Well, Aggie comes along. She said, I'll have a little bit of that, please. And I didn't want her, and I stuck my foot out to shoo her away, and she thought I was going to play with her. So she got me down, and I got in a ball so she wouldn't get my innards. And so she did that for a while, and she backed up. Okay, aren't you going to play? You know, I was angry at her because she had me down. Frightened. And so I got up before she decided, well, play again. She just sat back waiting for me to play with her. And so I was angry. I went in the barn and I got me a pitchfork, and she and I went around that pasture. You don't do that to me. Well, after that, and then Jean had a little skirmish, I think, with her after that, and so Dad sold her. No more.
Poor Aggie.
Poor Aggie.
So we have Connie
But
to
she was not mean, only she was just
doing what she was taught as a baby.
And the rest of the pictures are just more or less self-explanatory on the place there in Ontario.
But the one on the second, after we look at Aggie, the one directly across from
But
that.
Aggie's not in here.
I'm sorry, the one choice is offspring. But directly across from that picture, you were telling me a story about, this is the thrasher?
Oh, Fred was on the thrashing machine at that time. And the thrashing machine cut the grain, and it went up however it did. It took the chaff away from the grain, and then the grain came through a little elevator thing, I guess, into a sack. And Fred was there, and he had to take the sack off and put another one on, then sew the sack, and there's a little slide that you can see there. He'd slide the filled sack down, and then somebody'd come along and pick up the filled
So he did the sewing while he was on the machine.
Yeah, and the way he sewed them, he once got a 3-corner tear in his pants, and so he had, it was like binder heavy twine, and that he'd sew the sacks with, and he had a big needle that was for that, and just a great big needle about that long, and it had an eye to thread the heavy thread through. And so he'd stick it in, and he'd push it through with this part of his hand, push it through. And so when he tore his trousers, he didn't want to make them bigger, so he sewed his trousers up just like
Oh my God.
whatever he had there. He didn't want to
Yeah.
wreck his trousers.
And
Yeah, that's kind of fun. I thought that was kind of, being a girl and seeing him sew that way. God.
The last picture is they're harvesting flax.
Yes, we raised flax one year. We know when the prices were right. Why Daddy did, well, maybe we better raise some flax. So we raised flax that year, and Bert was on the tractor, and Althea would go out and bring him a drink of water or whatever. We didn't have much to put it in those days.
And
Couldn't
so
afford it.
what else how many acres did you have, and what else did you grow? Do
Well,
you remember?
Dad had 80 acres there.
Just right, and that was all the land he had in Ontario. He didn't have plots other places?
Oh, I don't know about other places, but this was the plot that we grew up on.
Okay. And what did
And he said that when he passed away, he still had that 80 acres.
And that was what he and your mom bought before when they were in
fire.
Ravensdale to move their kids to better places.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is this the page? I think this is the
Yeah,
page.
you're
Okay, this one shows the corral, and where the Mormon derrick was a big tall pole, and then had another one coming out from it, was hooked up, and then they had guy wires, which was cable, that went down to anchor it, because it was just one pole standing up. And so there were 3 guy wires that had to brace it, because they took heavy loads of hay up to put on that stack. And so the guy wires had to be very strong for their cable. And so one ran across and over the milk, called it a milk.
Shed?
Well, we took the milk up to take care of
Process
it and process, cool it and all that. Anyway, and one went over the granary where I was in, and Dad had another one up. He was harnessing some mules to some corn cultivator or something, and when the lightning struck, it followed I guess it hit the Mormon derrick, and then it followed those guy wires all down, and I was in the milk, where we took the milk, and we cooled the milk up there, and I was in the grain part, where we kept sacks of grain that we'd feed the cows at night when they were eating, and Alta was down in the barn feeding a calf his noon meal. She had a bucket that had a big tit on it, or whatever you call it.
Oh, for the milk.
Yeah, and the calf would suck that,
Yeah.
because he wasn't trained to drink out of a bucket yet. It was just a new one. And when that hit, Alta said she didn't remember if that calf ever got his milk or not. And I was in the grain house, and then Dad was up by the house, hitching up to a corn cultivator. And when that hit his guy wire, the mules just took off, and they straddled it was a Russian olive tree, just bent it down. They just straddled it. They were scared. All they knew
ran
was
over the tree.
Yeah, just straddled that tree and then went over it. They were frightened, with
Yeah.
that crack and bang, scared the daylights out of them. And
So that's the story for that.
well, it stood up. It did a lot of work besides that. And there's horses in there now, but we used to bring the cows into the corral. There was a big feed bunk that they would eat there. And one time Althea was out feeding them. She was up where the feed part was. They'd stick their head through a little stanchion and eat it. And she was up there, and she saw this pheasant down in this corral, and she had a pitchfork in her hand because she was feeding hay. And she saw that, and so she threw that pitchfork at and just nailed him right there.
Pheasant?
The pheasant. And she came up to Alta and she said, "I stabbed him or something." And so Alta said, "Well, we just fixed him for dinner." Well, I don't think the season was in for them, but what could you didn't want to waste him.
Yeah. Okay, we're running out of space here. We're over space, so
Are we over time?
Slow us down.